because of traffic. And one of our themes here is opening up the 407. And if they did, they wouldn't have been late. So what we're going to do tonight is basically inform you about the 413, clear up misconceptions, and show you that there is light at the end of the tunnel. This is by no means a done deal, as what you see on the media, as those ads paid for by us that are lying to the general population, because there seems to be misunderstanding out there that this is, the government's going to go ahead with it. There's still a lot of work on the provincial side, but we can't let our guard down. Who are we? Stop the 413. We're grassroots, all volunteer-led organization across the GTA, and here to stop this highway, and again, bring about advice to people, knowledge to people about how we can stop this. To also look at what the alternatives are, as there are alternatives to this highway that don't cost us as much, that are less disruptive, and will be much better for us. Tonight's format is we're going to have an expert panel. Okay, all our experts are going to be able to speak for 5 minutes. Thereafter, we will have a question and answer. You would have received an indexed paper. Put your questions on there, hold them up, and one of our volunteers will pick them up. I'll introduce our speakers. Deb Schultz has extensive political experience as a Vaughan Regional Councillor and also as a federal Liberal MP. And she's going to be giving an overview of the 413. The panel and experts tonight, Stephanie Allen, who will address Indigenous issues. We have Laura Bowman, will address issues, species at risk. Gideon Foreman will address the public sentiment. Peter Miask will address transportation alternatives. And we're still waiting for Phil Pothen from Environmental Defense. Does everyone hear me okay? Okay. All right. You will notice empty seats here. One is from our Honourable Premmeet Sakaria, who is the MPP for Brampton South, our Minister of Transportation. He must be on his way. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I received no response from him. Project 413, the Ministry of Transportation, Highway 413 project team, reached out to him a number of times. They politely declined. So, that's right. So now we have all three opposition parties here: Mike Schreiner, Mary Margaret Kaman, and Sandy Shaw. And here comes Phil Pothen from Environmental Defense. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, but Phil, you're a lawyer, so we'll excuse you. You're late for court. We get it, right? So, again, we have our three opposition parties that are all against the 413. Vaughan is going to be the most affected community by the 413. Vaughan Council put together a formal resolution to ask the MPPs for Vaughan, which is Stephen Lecce and Michael Tobolo, to discuss their position or discuss the government's position on the 413. They didn't come out. They turned their back on us. This is a multi-billion-dollar project, and they didn't have the courtesy to come out and speak to us. But, yes, exactly. Shame. Deb?
Okay. Thanks very much, Andre. And I really want to thank everybody in the room for coming out. It's really great to see so many interested people on this very important topic. And many people said to me, isn't it a done deal? And I've been told many times things are a done deal, and in fact, they've been reversed. So I never give up until it's over, and it's definitely not over. So I'm glad to see all of you feeling the same way. It's not over. There are a lot of things we can do, and we need to band together to do them. So thank you for being here. I want to start the meeting with a land acknowledgement, an Indigenous land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the City of Vaughan is situated in the territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We also recognize the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee, The City of Vaughan is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. We appreciate our rich Indigenous heritage and are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. This is really appropriate to do this acknowledgement because it's not just to recognize the extensive Indigenous history in Vaughan, but to acknowledge the rich Indigenous history all across the path of this proposed Highway 413. So I don't think I really need to do an overview. For most of the people in the room, you have a pretty good handle on what's been going on, but I will give a quick overview. So, as you know, the Ontario government is proposing to build a new 59-kilometre, 4 to 6 lane controlled access highway and a transitway corridor just north of the Highway 407. It'll connect to the 401 in Halton and end at the 400 in Vaughan, cutting through Halton Hills, Brampton, Caledon, and Vaughan. And it includes spur connections to the 410 in Brampton and to the 427 in Vaughan. The estimated capital cost has been between $6 billion and $10 billion. However, more recent assessments have put it much higher than that. And as we can see with every transportation project that's occurred, it just skyrockets. So we expect this to be much more expensive than is being quoted currently. The Highway 413 has been studied for almost 2 decades at a significant cost to the public. It was shelved in 2018 by the Wynne government as it was shown not to be the best solution to address the needs of the GTA and our growing region. However, it's now been resurrected by the Ford government, and the project's currently undergoing a provincial environmental assessment by the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario. And Phil and others will be getting into other initiatives. I have a long history with the Impact Assessment Act, having been chair of the committee that brought that in and was very proud of it. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court ruled it to be an overreach, and the federal government has backed off while they rework that Impact Assessment Act. But I won't steal the thunder of those that are on the stage. They're going to share a little bit more about that. But I was also proud to be a minister when our government included the 413 for assessment. So I'm very disappointed at where we're at now based on the hard work that everybody's done, but not defeated. So the project will negatively impact 29 species at risk habitats, including 2 endangered species. That's red-side dace and Rapid's clubtail, and we'll hear more about that. Eliminate thousands of acres of irreplaceable prime farmland, negatively impact 4 watershed headwater areas with an estimated 85 river and stream crossings, which will contaminate those rivers at every crossing. Transect highly vulnerable aquifers and groundwater recharge areas and wellhead protection areas. It will eliminate 400 acres of greenbelt and effectively destroy the ecological integrity of the Nashville Conservation Reserve. And if any of you have not been in the Nashville Conservation Reserve, please go and take a look. You'll cry at what's going to happen there. Contribute to sprawl development that's contrary to smart growth principles and the climate targets. Require over 100,000 truckloads of aggregate from the surrounding area and create over a decade of truck traffic, dust, noise through the construction of this highway. To add insult to injury, not only did the Ford government ignore a former expert panel that determined the Highway 413 was not in the best interest of the public, nor would it save more than a few minutes of commute time on average. But it went against that of its own consultants. It instead chose a route through Vaughan that would be the most devastating to the natural environment, and in the consultants' own words, it undermines, the route they chose, undermines the credibility of the entire project. Highway completion is many years off, likely 10 plus years, and it will result in many years of construction, noise, dust, disturbance to those living in the affected areas with little real-time savings for the majority of commuters, despite what Ford is advertising. Regional reports have confirmed that the new highway will result in the need for expansion of regional roads to deal with the traffic expected to enter and exit this new highway. in addition to what will be needed to accommodate the resulting development that will be around this highway. The regional road expenses will be borne by the property tax base in the communities. And most people haven't really twigged to what that's going to look like on your property tax bill. There are better alternatives available that are cheaper and less disruptive, and we're going to talk about some of those today. So I'd like to now turn the discussion over to our excellent panel of experts, and that will be sharing more details and perspectives on the issue. So I'd like to introduce Stephanie Allen, who's going to be talking the Indigenous perspective with us. She is a PhD student at U of T studying the Rapids Clubtail. She also completed her master's thesis on the Rapids Clubtail and its environment, including the Humber River. She is a First Nation scientist, and I am not going to say this well, but I'm going to try. Kanian Kekaka? All right.
Okay.
All right, you're gonna say it right. Mohawk from Six Nations of the Grand River and a consultant for the Chiefs of Ontario on biodiversity and the EIA. And please forgive me my pronunciation. Over to you, Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you to the organizers for including me. My audition is a bit last minute. You can hear me all right? I tend to be loud, even without a microphone. I'm worried I'm going to blast you. So sego sebo guego wagatsagununi jigan idiwis. I'm Stephanie Allen, as introduced. I'm Ganya Gahaga from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, and I have kinship ties to the Anishinaabeg Nation. My children are Sagamok Anishinaabeg members, and I also have a 2-year-old granddaughter, and she's a member of Shishigwaning First Nation. As introduced, I'm a former employee of Chiefs of Ontario, and I've worked for 25 years as an environmental scientist, predominantly for Ontario First Nations, and interestingly, in the field of capital infrastructure. I am currently a contractor with Chiefs of Ontario, but I have to emphasize I'm here representing myself. I am not representing my First Nation or Chiefs of Ontario. These are really important issues. The 413 will impact rights, and it is important that the rights holders, our representatives, speak to those. So as mentioned, I'm also a PhD student. I'm in my 2nd year at the University of Toronto, and I completed my master's studying Rapids Clubtail, and I'm continuing with my PhD looking at 3 of Ontario's endangered riverine dragonflies, including rapids. So I was quite surprised to see all the press around rapids. Insects don't usually make it to the press, except for a few butterflies and pollinators, but to see a dragonfly in the press was a little bit shocking. And it's a very small, diminutive dragonfly, not often seen. It's and it is in the area, in the Humber, and specifically the area that was mentioned, the Nashville Conservation Reserve. This dragonfly was assessed by Kasiwik federally in 2008 as endangered. It was reassessed in 2018, and it remains endangered. It is found in some states in the U.S., but everywhere pretty much that it's found, it is at risk. It has very narrow habitat preferences, and there are no scientific studies on the species, so we don't know very much information, which means it's a great species for me to be studying, but it's really frustrating to hear about this development. Next slide, please. So where is rapids found in Ontario? Originally it was found in 7 locations. It's now only found in 5. It's been extirpated from the Credit River, which was the first site that it was found in Canada. And it is believed extirpated from the Thames River. It hasn't been seen there since 1989. So it's now only found in 5 rivers. The Humber, the Mississippi over in eastern Ontario, the Nith, the Grand, and the Au Sable River. Next slide, please. Oh, one back. So if you were to ask me my opinion on this project on the basis of Rapids Clubtail alone, I would say no, you can't risk it. Some may say that's foolish, but I'll get into why. But if you don't think that an endangered dragonfly is enough to stop a project like this, or a dace, actually my lab, I'm in a fish lab with Dr. Nicholas Mandrak is my supervisor, and he's the red-side dace expert, so I'm glad red-side dace is getting some attention as well. But if that doesn't convince you, Ontario government's own reports are flagging really disturbing trends in this province. So the state of water in Ontario. 60% of rivers and streams are rated as poor quality with respect to biological health, and 41% marginal to poor based on water chemistry. State of nature, species at risk. As of 2022, 28% of species are of conservation concern. That is an alarming number, more than 1 in 4 in this province. And Southern Ontario has a higher percentage. In fact, Southern Ontario is one of the most critical areas in all of Canada for species at risk, and that's largely due to human-related activities and habitat loss. Next slide. Another report of the Auditor General of Ontario, recent, the 2021 audit, found that development is always approved, despite harm to species at risk. Again, somewhat naively, I come from a culture where law is very, very important. It's one of the bases for our cultural identity, and we don't look for every excuse to violate the law. So when you have endangered species law, I cannot understand how every single permit to harm or kill species at risk in this province gets approved. And as the graph shows, since conditional exemptions were put in place in 2014, the number has skyrocketed, and nobody is, first of all, none of that goes to the public for comment. It's just done, and nobody considers cumulative effects. So the example on here is Blanding's turtle. Maybe you care about turtles more than you care about dragonflies or red-side dace. Blanding's turtle, over 1,400 approvals. This is death by 1,000 cuts, and it needs to stop. Next slide. So, I know people wanted to hear Indigenous perspectives. So, again, like I said, I'm not an official spokesperson, but there are a number of First Nations whose territories include the path of Highway 413, including my own community, Six Nations, as well as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Huron-Wendat Nation, and the 7 First Nations within the Williams Treaty area. Some of the potential concerns are archaeological, impacts to traditional gathering, hunting and fishing, and as well the cumulative impacts to our constitutionally protected rights. This is my granddaughter, Begoniasin. Doesn't have a dragonfly but on her helmet, but she does have a butterfly. Hopefully she will be an entomologist one day. Next slide. So the last thing I wanted to draw your attention to, we talk a lot about rights and impacts to rights, but we are supposed to be in an era where we're looking beyond that. United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, we have a say in what happens in our territories. And again, that goes beyond rights. It should be looking at our knowledge, our decision making, and yes, whether or not we agree for a project like this to go forward. So if I was applying my own culture to this project, there's a couple of principles, and I am free to talk about those. They're very common. Everyone within my confederacy would share this. It's, so the first is the Ohondo Galuwadekwa. and you may have heard it recited. It's usually an opening that's given before any meeting. And it's also, many people just start their day with it. It's also referred to as a Thanksgiving address, or the words that come before all else. And within that, we give thanks and acknowledge all aspects of the natural world for the role that they do. So that includes, we thank the thunderers. So we acknowledge the climate. We thank all of the species, including insects. Everybody has their own version, although all of it has the same elements. So certainly, when I think through it, when I'm in Longhouse, I'm thinking dragonflies. So that, and in fact, this is the basis for how the Mohawks of Akwesasne do their environmental assessments. They use this as their framework, and they do it quite successfully, not just for projects on reserve, but projects throughout their territory. So I would suggest that the second thing is a very basic principle. Everyone's heard about it. It's the 7th generation principle. It's contained within our great law. But when you think about it, I was thinking, 7 generations, wow. When we're also told to look back. So I was born in 1970. So if I go back 7 generations, we're talking about the era right after the War of 1812. Canada didn't exist. The combustion engine didn't exist. The Indian Act didn't exist. And we weren't talking about crisis after crisis, climate change, biodiversity, infrastructure. So thinking forward 7 generations, and I've got 2, I've got my children and my grandchildren alive. I can't even imagine what this would look like, but I can tell you that I don't think this project would meet the definition or the needs for the future. So I just want to leave you with that. And again, thank you, Nyawagoa, for having me.
Stephanie, thank you very much. Really appreciate that perspective. Next, we have Phil Pothen, and he's going to be talking to us about provincial and federal environmental requirements. He's the program manager, Land Use and Ontario Environment and Council. Let's state this again. He's the program manager, Land Use and Ontario Environment and Council for the environmental organization Environmental Defence. Phil is a land use planning and environmental lawyer with a background in landscape ecology, landscape architecture, and 10 years of experience advising and representing provincial policymakers. Select small builders, so provincial policymakers, small builders, select small builders, and concerned residents. He joined EDC to advance the big picture approaches to problems he has dealt with case by case. A comprehensive alternative vision for development and industry that meets people's needs while preserving Ontario's natural spaces, farmland, and other greenfields in perpetuity. Welcome, Phil. Do you want to come to the podium? It's all yours.
So hey everybody, I think I only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to go right down to it.
We want to be interesting, Phil. 5 minutes, what can you get?
Okay. Well, we've known since October's Supreme Court of Canada opinion. It was not a decision, but it was an opinion on the constitutionality of the Impact Assessment Act that because of problems with some of the original language of that act, the current designation, the current impact assessment for 413 would need to be discontinued and then reinstituted under an updated version of the law. So they'd need to amend the law to replace the provisions around how projects get designated and how decisions are made. The former impact assessment was never going to remain in place under the old language. So our ask since October, we've all known this, since October, it's been very straightforward. It has been that they should actually do the amendments to the Impact Assessment Act that were required to restore its constitutionality, and that they do those amendments in a way that allows Highway 413 to be designated again. And then our second ask was that they actually redesignate 413 and do a full and thorough impact assessment. Now, we had hoped also that the federal government would make procedural moves in the province's attempt to strike down the Impact Assessment Act, enforce discontinuation of the old impact assessment, that would delay any court ruling until the new act was in place, so that there wouldn't be this temporary gap in protection. And we retained outside counsel, Laura's team over there at EcoJustice, so that we ourselves could introduce those procedural arguments. So we were disappointed that the settlement they entered to avoid having the whole Impact Assessment Act struck down at all, because that's kind of what we were worried would happen. To avoid that happening, they entered into a sort of a temporary deal that involved discontinuing the old impact assessment before the new act was in place. And that's a call they made. We weren't happy with it because it creates this temporary gap. But our disappointment was about this temporary gap. None of that stuff, not the discontinuation of the current impact assessment, not the memorandum of understanding that you've all heard about. None of it is inconsistent with our original expectation and ask as to what would happen, which is that the old assessment would be discontinued and a new impact assessment would be reinstituted. The MOU that you've been hearing so much about, and I think that struck a lot of fear just from what it sounded like, it expressly reserved the power of the minister both to restore the legislation, and there's no restriction on the ability to redesignate. A lot of the understandable public panic that followed and the real bad feeling and of disillusionment and worry that maybe it's too late was very intentionally engineered by the Ontario government, which very cynically has tried to misrepresent the discontinuation of the old impact assessment, which we knew for months would need to be reinstituted under a new act anyway. We knew that. And the MOU as some kind of decision not to fix the Impact Assessment Act. So if you look, the Premier and Prime Minister Zakaria have been talking like, oh, well, that's it. The Impact Assessment Act is not going to be allowing the designation of highways anymore. It's done. We're going to go ahead. There's no impact assessment. And they've been trying to create the impression that there's some agreement not to designate Highway 413. And that's expressly not the case. On April 30th, the Premier went so far as to hold a press conference claiming, oh, we're going to start building this thing next year. It's going to happen. And let's get going. But if you look, he very carefully skirted around saying anything that meant anything. It wasn't that we're putting it out to tender. It's that we're having exploratory meetings to feel out who might be interested if we put it out to tender. It was very clearly intended to create the impression that this is a done deal when it wasn't. And we know why now he did that. Because later that afternoon, the federal government did introduce, as part of the budget bill, which means it's going to pass, new impact assessment legislation that fixes the unconstitutionality of the old Impact Assessment Act. So this was all posturing to really create and engineer a set of conditions where, A, it's hard for the government now to go back and reinstitute because people will be under the false impression that there's some deal, and are they changing their mind? Are they flip-flopping? So the provincial government is intentionally trying to generate that narrative because they knew the new Impact Assessment Act was coming. And then secondly, it's to try, and by having all of us start to say things like the highway will have these impacts, It's too bad that they did this. It's to sort of bake in all of the downsides of not designating for the federal government. So they're trying to create a situation where the easiest thing for the federal government to do is to sell out all of us, all of you, everyone who voted for them because they were going to do things like this. They're trying to create that condition where the federal government won't do this. But in fact, as many of you will have found out when you called your federal MP, they haven't really been playing along. They've said very clearly, we will be passing a new impact assessment, an updated impact assessment, and we are not making any decision not to redesignate the 413. That's what they've been saying. If you send an email to a minister's office or the environment minister's office, that's what you'll say. So there are issues with the act, and it is by no means a slam dunk, 100% sort of thing that the impact assessment is going to come back, because there are definitely forces, that are trying to push them in the wrong direction. But the default position, if you talk to the environment minister, you talk to the staff, all indications are that we are headed to a redesignation unless there's some internal shift if somebody decides to sell us out. And so the key thing is to keep the pressure on, to make it clear if you're volunteering for a campaign, we will not volunteer for you if you do not quickly reinstate full impact assessment. Because a lot of you're people who show up for things. So you're people who matter. So you've got to make this a quid pro quo, a threat. You need to do this in order to have our support. And then the bigger concern here, we think, more than no new assessment at all, is that there will be some backdoor tactics used to nominally have a new impact assessment, but they will actually water down the assessment or effectively delegate some of the decision making to the province, which, as you've heard, there's only one answer. So we're also going to have to start being very diligent. We're going to start talking as though we take it for granted that there's going to be a new impact assessment, and really focus on telling them that it's got to be a real impact assessment and not a fake deemed impact assessment that really involves allowing the province to just relying on the say-so of the province that the requirements have been met. Yeah, so that's where we're at, and I think I'm over my 5 minutes, so I'll go on.
Phil, I'll give you that to give to Laura. Yeah. Phil, thanks very much. It is complicated about what's been going on, and a lot of people have been confused, and it's been very helpful for you to lay that out and impress upon the effect that we need to generate to our MPs in the federal level, that we are not giving up on this. We do not accept that they're going to give up on this, and that they need to keep the pressure on through the Impact Assessment Act. So next up is Laura Bowman, and she's a lawyer at EcoJustice Canada in Toronto. She was called to the Ontario Bar in 2007 and has a Juris Doctor from the University of Toronto and a Master's of Laws from Osgoode in Administrative Law. She has lived and practiced in 3 different provinces and in Nunavut. She represents environmental groups, First Nations, and community groups at all levels of court in judicial reviews. She's on EcoJustice's Healthy Communities team and is fascinated by sprawl and food systems and how they drive the triple planetary crisis of climate emergency, toxic pollution, and biodiversity loss. Welcome, Laura.
Thanks. So I've been asked to come and talk a little bit about endangered species, but you're a tough act to follow. So the Highway 413, because it's such a long piece of linear infrastructure and it crosses so many different waterways across the Humber and Credit watersheds in particular, it really does impact a lot of very sensitive habitat for species at risk. And the one that we've got on the screen there is the red-side dace, which is an adorable little minnow which eats terrestrial insects. And this particular fish is found in many places along the Highway 413 route. It is very, very endangered. It has been in severe decline in recent years. Its population is estimated to have been reduced by 50%. The number of locations where it's been found has fallen by 50% as well in recent years. And one of the things about this fish and how it interacts with Highway 413 is that whenever you increase the paved surfaces in a watershed, you cause a cascade of different harms to that watershed. You change the flow of the different rivers. There's increase in chloride contamination from road salt. You get turbidity, so the water becomes less clear. And this fish is very sensitive to these kinds of changes. It can't see the insects that it catches when the rivers aren't clear. It depends on a healthy headwaters in particular, and the headwaters that go through the Peel Plain, Caledon, and many of the places that Highway 413 would destroy are really crucial for the watershed health in the Credit and Humber River watersheds. And so this is really an indicator species which shows us through its decline the overall declining health of GTA watersheds, because this fish is very concentrated in the Greater Toronto area and has been severely impacted by development. Unfortunately, we've seen very severe delays in the listing of this species. It took over 9 years for it to be listed federally. In the protection of the critical habitat for this species federally, we're still waiting for the federal government to get its act together to impose a final recovery strategy federally that would protect the critical habitat of this fish. They've already consulted on the recovery strategy. It's ready to go. We just need them to finalize it. And at the same time as this is going on with the federal delays, Ontario, who has also listed this species as endangered under provincial legislation, has proposed to change the definition of red-side dace habitat to dramatically reduce the amount of habitat that is protected. And it's no coincidence that they're doing this at the same time as pushing on Highway 413, because Highway 413 has big problems if you actually want to maintain red-side dace and a number of other endangered species along the route. So what we're going to see is a lot of pressure being put on the federal government to protect the critical habitat of this fish. They're already many years behind in doing that. They need to get on with it, and they need to make sure that they don't issue federal species at risk permits for the destruction of critical habitat for federally listed species that can't, for effects that can't be mitigated in this project. And we know that you can't mitigate some of the effects on this fish. If you build a highway, you get sprawl around the highway, the impervious paved surfaces in the headwaters expand dramatically, and you can't, the highway is fundamentally incompatible with the protection of the headwaters features in the watersheds. There are other species at risk that are affected as well that we haven't really gotten into today. The red-headed woodpecker has critical habitat along the route. Again, we need them to get on with it, make sure that that critical habitat is protected. The western chorus frog in the Humber Valley shares a lot of habitat with the Rapids club-tail dragonfly. We also need the federal government to step up and make sure that its federally listed species, which it has quite clear jurisdiction over, are actually protected. So we need to keep that pressure up, in part because there's pressure the other way, like Phil mentioned. There's pressure to allow Ontario to run the show on some of these species. There is pressure to make a deal about how it's going to work with these species. And we're already seeing that they're starting to discuss these things and meet. So we really need to make sure that your voices are heard, that you're telling your federal representatives not to give in to Ontario's completely flawed endangered species permitting system where every permit is approved, and to exercise their own oversight over species at risk permitting. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Laura. I know there is so much information to share. There's so many species that are going to be affected. And we may wonder, oh, it's just this species, that species. But they're all part of a web, and they all indicators that we are degrading our environment. And that degradation is going to be affecting our health too. So it's not just about species, it's about the habitats that they live in, the degradation of those habitats, and that will affect us too. So anyway, I don't need to tell you all, I think most of you appreciate it. So next up is Gideon Foreman. Gideon is the Climate and Transportation Policy Analyst at David Suzuki Foundation. His expertise is in climate policy, transportation, and clean energy. He has a master's in philosophy at McGill University and a certificate in renewable energy from the University of Toronto. He received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2013 and is a former executive director of Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. Welcome, Gideon. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm delighted to see so many people here. It's wonderful that there's so much interest and concern. I'm going to keep my remarks quite brief. A lot of what we've heard tonight has been, serious and dark. What I hope that I can present to you now is some quite hopeful things. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of polling that the David Suzuki Foundation did. We commissioned Ecos Research, a professional pollster, to get Ontarians' opinions and attitudes on 413 and on public transit, and the numbers are very, very encouraging. If you take away one thing tonight, it is that the public is very much on side with what we are all trying to do in this room. So we commissioned Ecos. They gave us their results in late 2023. This was a proper poll, not these sort of fake, phony push polls. This was a real poll, over 800 adults randomly selected across the province. So I'm just going to walk very briefly through some of the data, and I hope you'll see that it really is very encouraging. So Ecos asked Ontarians 2 questions about Highway 413. The first said to Ontarians, some people say that it's appropriate to put highways through the Greenbelt. Other people say the Greenbelt is no place for new highways. Which is closer to your belief? 74%, almost 3 out of 4 Ontarians said the Greenbelt is no place for new highways. That is very encouraging. Then Ecos asked a second question. We wanted to make sure that the first one was not just an anomaly. Ecos asked a second question. Ecos said to Ontarians, lots of farmers are against Highway 413 because it's going to destroy a lot of farmland. Do you agree or disagree with the farmers' opposition to Highway 413? 81%, 8 in 10 Ontarians agree with the farmers' opposition to the highway. These are very, very encouraging data points. And it really shows that if we work together, there is the possibility of stopping this damn thing. Ecos asked 2 questions also about public transit. So we wanted to know what Ontarians didn't want and what they do want. They don't want highways through the Greenbelt. Turns out they do want more money for public transit. 2 questions. The first was about the federal government and the province putting more money into public transit, about 8 in 10. And then a question about just the province putting more money into public transit. We wanted 2 questions again to see if the results were just an anomaly. In both cases, about 8 in 10 Ontarians are saying they want more money for public transit. So we know what Ontarians don't want. We know what they do want when it comes to transportation. Just quickly, and I'll wrap up in a moment, but I also wanted to share with you some data from the 905 region where the highway would go. We're going to stop it, but if it did go, this is where it would be in 905. Crucial part of the province. When you win 905, you typically win the election. Even in 905, where the highway would go, and lots of people drive, I don't need to tell you, even there, the numbers are very strong. Almost 7 in 10 say Greenbelt is no place for a new highway. Almost 3 out of 4, 73%, agree with the farmers' opposition to the highway. right? So these are folks who would be using the highway. These are folks, most of whom were drivers themselves, saying Greenbelt is no place for a new highway. And also, which is really encouraging, is the vast majority of folks in 905, almost 8 in 10, also want more money for public transit. Many folks in 905, I don't need to tell you, don't use transit themselves, but they still support it. They want to see the government put more money into transit. These are very, very encouraging results in a key part of the province that matters in elections. So key takeaways: broad opposition in every region of the province, across every demographic that ECOS looked at. Older folks, younger folks, high school educated, university educated. Broad opposition to new Greenbelt highways right across the province. In crucial 905, vote-rich 905, about 7 in 10 are against Highway 413, also very encouraging. And broad support across every demographic for putting more money into public transit. So this is an issue that's both the right thing to do, stopping the highway, and is also really popular. So I just want to reiterate what other folks have said on the panel. We are absolutely 100% determined to stop this thing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Please sign our petition if you haven't done that already. Our petition goes to Minister Guilbeault, the federal minister who could stop this thing or certainly slow it down. We have a petition up. As I was looking at it the other day, we already have over 73,000 people who've signed the petition. We'd love to get it up to 75,000 in the next week, so please help us with that. And please tell your MP and your MPP that canceling this highway is the right thing to do, and it would be really popular to cancel it. Thank you very much.
Gideon, thanks very much for
Pleasure.
giving us direction and hope. Next up is Peter Misek. He is the president of Transport Action Ontario. Transport Action Ontario is a non-government organization working cooperatively with government and industry stakeholders, communities, individuals, and the media to develop and implement a rail and bus-based public transportation network in Ontario. Peter has a PhD in chemistry and worked for decades in the petrochemical industry. He retired in 2007 and is now dedicating his time to his passion for sustainable transportation and urban planning. Welcome, Peter.
I'm going to continue on the optimistic theme that Mr. Foreman pointed about. But first, I just want to point out, in case folks didn't notice it, on the back side of the agenda package that you got is a list of provincial MPPs and federal MPs. When you've heard almost every speaker say, contact your federal and provincial MPP or MP. This will work for most of you. Okay, let's continue with the optimistic theme. We have to first look, and I'm going to talk about transportation alternatives to the highway. We have to first understand that there's we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of people going to move to the Western GTA in the next 20 or 30 years. I didn't bother looking up the numbers, but I think it's at least 1 million extra population and probably hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs. So there's no question in my mind that extra transportation capacity is needed. The highway's one option, but we think there's a better option. And that option has two alternatives taken together, which we think are superior to Highway 413. The first is rapid transit, and the second is a truck toll subsidy on Highway 407. So I'm going to cover both of those in sequence. This is a map from the most recent Metrolinx Regional Transportation Plan. It shows what they propose to have built by 2041. I'm not going to cover it in detail other than to say there is a lot of stuff in the Western GTA. We've taken those lines and examined them in a little more detail. And these are all Metrolinx numbers, both on cost and rider capacity. A lot of these were taken from Metrolinx's reports from about 2020. The Milton line, which is the third one down, improvements to Go Milton is taken from a very recent announcement made by Minister Sarkaria. Bottom line is the total number here, the total number of, say, 10 billion is exactly what we feel Highway 413 will cost, 6 to 10 billion. The province has not revealed what the cost is. But the difference is, for the same cost, you can get three GO improvements, 2 extensions, and a brand new line to Bolton, and 4 LRT, BRT projects. Brampton, Dundas Street, Brampton, Queen Street, and Major Mackenzie, all of which, all 7 of these are currently unfunded. The important thing is if you look at the people per hour carrying capacity of the transit lines and compare it to the highway, for the same dollars, you could move 3 to 4 times as many people by rapid transit than you can for a highway. This is not rocket science. You can validate all these numbers very easily. The other point that isn't shown on this chart is that these are way better destinations for most people. They want to go to downtown Brampton. They want to go to downtown Mississauga, downtown Vaughan. They don't necessarily want to go from the Esso station on Highway 400 to Milton. And that's where the highway goes. Okay, so that's all I have time for on the transit side. Let's talk about the other aspect, which is freight movement. Again, we have to acknowledge that efficient truck movement is very important, especially in this part of the GTA where there's a lot of logistics entities. Building a highway sounds good, but it is well known that highway expansions in urban areas will not reduce traffic congestion in the long term due to a phenomenon called induced demand. What happens is, it's another way of saying, if you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will drive. People, once they see a new highway, they start using their car more, they go longer distances, they move into busier times of the day. Before you know it, that highway is as congested as the other ones. A much better alternative, in our opinion, and this was first suggested by the expert panel that I believe Deb mentioned. Back in 2017, under the previous government, they hired an expert panel, and that panel said, look, let's give the trucks some sort of a break on Highway 407. So I costed this out, and it's been published and validated by another report by Environmental Defense. Basically, if you take, whoa, what have I done here? There we go, thank you. You take 4 million trucks a year, that's a number that came from the government. Look at an average toll. Tolls for small trucks are $1 a kilometer, tolls for big trucks $1.50, so average at $1.25. Assume they go the full length of the highway, which is probably extreme, but 50 kilometers. That works out to be $260 million a year of subsidy. And if you do what's called a net present value, which is a cash time value of money analysis, that works out to a present value of $4 billion. The alternative to building a highway, capital cost plus land, has a PV of $7.1 billion. I assumed $8 billion, middle range, for spread over 4 years. There's O&M costs, operations and maintenance costs for every highway. We took those numbers from the 427, which just got expanded. That total present value is $8.6 billion. And this comparison is conservative because, as you know, the Highway 407 is a much better location for most truck trips than because they're going to be going from Brampton to Oshawa or someplace, okay? So they're not going from the Esso station, necessarily from the Esso station on 400 to Milton. The other thing is it should be a shorter trip, which will benefit the environment. And it may well be possible for the province, if they were to take this seriously, to try to negotiate a volume discount with the 407 folks. We still own the highway. There's an 80-year concession left on it. I was conservative and assumed today's toll rates, but maybe there's a deal that can be made. Either way, it's a lot cheaper. To wrap up then, there are strategic advantages of transit and the 407 truck alternative versus the highway. It's similar capital cost, higher people moving capacity, which is essential for our growing population, better truck movement, much less environmental impact. We heard all about that from the other folks. does not encourage car-dependent growth. It's got good development potential. You hear a lot about all the developers that are going to make out like bandits on the 413. Well, there'll be another set of developers that'll make out like bandits on Queen Street, Major Mackenzie, et cetera. So the economic uplift will be the same regardless of what happens. It serves key destinations better, like the downtown urban growth centers, and it uses existing highway infrastructure much more efficiently. Right now, Highway 407 is definitely underutilized, and it makes no sense in a view of an uncertain future to build a new highway until we fully utilize that one. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. You can.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And it's always good to be positive. And people say, well, you know, you say no highway, but what's the alternative? So now you've heard there's some real serious alternatives that we've dug into, and they make perfect sense. So hopefully that's given you something to chew on there and something to share when people push back and say, well, we need the highway. Well, here's what we really need. Okay, next up, we've invited our opposition leaders, opposition parties, to be present and share with us their positions, because it's very important that we know where our parties are going with this particular issue. So Sandy Shaw was first elected to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in 2018 and is currently serving as the Critic for Environment, Conservation and Parks and Deputy Opposition Whip. Sandy has been a fierce advocate for our environment, and in the wake of Sewergate, she was unrelenting in her search for answers and solutions. Her private member's bill, the Coots Paradise Water Accountability Act, aimed to provide transparency and accountability. She's widely known for her work with progressive organizations like the Social Planning Council, the United Way, and was the first ever elected female board chair of First Ontario Credit Union. Sandy graduated from University of Toronto in corporate social responsibility and built innovative projects such as Hamilton's first microloan program and authored Hamilton's first Women and Poverty Report, and holds the esteemed Women of Distinction Award for her community leadership. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think my colleagues here, you didn't know all about me. They just thought I was a loud heckler at Queen's Park. You know, despite my yellow jacket and the theme of optimism, I don't know if what I'm about to say is going to cheer you up, but I'll try. And I want to start by saying, really, it is such an honor to be here with this panel, absolutely. But it is an honor to be in a room with people like you who speak up and show up. You all deserve a round of applause. You know, I would like to, groups like Stop Sprawl, I would like to take credit that Hamilton was the birthplace of the Stop Sprawl movement. GASP, amazing work in Stop 413. We need you. You need us, we need you. You know, together our powers like the Shazam ring, I don't know if I'm aging myself, but the two sides come together and give us the power that we need to make positive change in this province. So continue the work that you're doing. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, call your MPs, call your MPPs. It really does work. I just want to say, when you're listening to all of this, or when you're listening to Doug Ford talk, or when you're listening to the answers that the ministers give us at Queen's Park, they call it question period, not answer period, because you never get an answer. But what I want to say is keep in mind, who is Doug Ford working for? Because that will give you the answers that you need for all these reasons. Why would he build on the Greenbelt? Who is he working for? Why would he build a highway through the Greenbelt? Who is he working for? That's what you need to keep asking yourself. And we did see success with the Greenbelt. And I want to just say, the Greenbelt was a full frontal assault, right? He just went right out there, urban boundary expansion is going to build on the Greenbelt, and got caught big time thanks to folks like you. Exactly. He had to roll it back because he got caught with his hands in the cookie jar, but he is still at it, just so you know. He's not given up. And now he's doing it with kind of stealth, sneaky ways, putting things in bills that have nothing to do with it, slashing or kneecapping the Conservation Authority's ability to protect our lands, expediting land expropriation, watering down species at risk, delisting species at risk. I mean, really, the poor red side days. Queen's Park is rife with lobbyists. I just can't believe that no one can hire a lobbyist for the poor red side days. I think that would be important for those species. But what this government is doing, they're still at it. And so we now know their cover story was that it was about building housing for the Greenbelt. And we know that it was never a question of housing. We know that now. It's proof positive that that's not the case. And so the question now is, really, is this 407 actually about saving commuters' time? And when I ask you that question, also remember, who is Doug Ford working for, right? Did I say 407? I meant 413, all the highways. So yeah, why would he do that? Why would he do that despite all the evidence, the experts that says that this is not the way to go? I will say, based on experts providing their advice and hearings that we've participated in, we as the official opposition, we moved what's called an opposition day motion. We put forward a motion that is the solution, right, to commuter problems, which is to take the tolls, the truck tolls, off the 407. We suggested that. We debated it, and they voted it down. They said no. So exactly. So why would they vote no? Who are they working for? There's your answer right now. So they're not really about looking for solutions. They're looking for a cover story as to why they can build this 413 through the Greenbelt, through loss of farmland. They're trying to do this because they haven't given up on the ability to deliver public dollars to their private interests. And while I'm on the subject of dollars, what I want to say is we know that this will be an environmental disaster, but it will be a financial disaster for the people of Ontario as well. It's your tax dollars. I know you know that. But what I want to leave you with is the notion that I still have a pencil in my hand. What is going on here? There you go. So what I want to leave you with is the notion that this government is spending big. They have the largest debt and deficit in the history of the province. Big time. They have a debt to GDP ratio that's higher than when the Liberals left office, which is what they railed about, but now they have that huge debt. They're spending big, but they're not spending it on us because they have the lowest spending, the lowest per capita spending on housing and on health care. So my question to folks in the room, where we have education classrooms that are falling apart. We have seniors that are being evicted from their home. There's 2.4 million Ontarians that don't have a doctor. You go to Emerge and you can wait days. Those are being cut while he's investing 10 to 15 billion, who knows, in this highway. So, if I didn't, I wasn't here to cheer you up, but hopefully I got you riled up, and you will continue to do what you're doing tonight, is to call this government on this false story that the 413 is to save time for families to spend time with their families. They can get home early. Those families aren't getting home early because they're going to have to work extra hours to pay for this thing. So I want to thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to your questions, and I don't know how over time. I hope I'm not. Oh, look at
You're good.
my official. Am I good? How?
Well, you're a tiny bit. It's okay. Everybody
All
was
right.
running over.
Okay.
Almost.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Sandy, thanks very much. Really appreciate that. And now I'd like to invite Mary Margaret Mahon. How do you say it?
Okay,
McMahon.
I always say it's McMahon. It should be McWoman, but it's McMahon.
You're right. You're the MPP for Beaches East York, and you were elected to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in June 2022, and currently serves as the Liberal critic for the environment and climate change. You previously served on the Toronto City Council from 2010 to 2018, and you represented Ward 32, Beaches East York. Hope I'm getting this all right. You are a strong city builder. Long before you were elected to City Council, You work tirelessly as a passionate volunteer on projects for a variety of organizations, ranging from environmental education, small business advocacy, and streetscape beautification, to public awareness raising on food security issues and initiatives. You have a knack for bringing people together and inspiring them, whether it's working across party lines on the floor of council to achieve a unanimous vote, or empowering residents to form advocacy groups to implement change in their neighborhoods. You ensure everyone's voice is heard and their ideas are valued. Mary Margaret is a true collaborator. She is action-oriented and prides herself in getting things done. Welcome.
Wow, I don't
Yeah.
know who the heck
got
wrote that, but anyways. All right, so, so what did you say? Gideon got us cheered up, and Sandy got us riled up, and I'm going to get you pumped up because you're too bloody quiet. Come on. So, we had a rally in Beaches East York recently, and I'm a big chanter. So you're going to repeat after me. Hey, hey. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Ho, ho. 413 has got to go. 413 has got to go. Together, hey, hey. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. 413's got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. 413 has got to go. Okay. Now take that and make some noise all the way to your MPP's offices at some point. So I'm here. I'm going to give you hope. Because I'm an eternal optimist. And even though at City Council I say, when I was there in 2010 to 2018, I got this gray hair from Rob Ford and this gray hair from Doug Ford. But here I am again. So you know what? What gives me hope is seeing all of you tonight. And thank you to the organizers for pulling this off. And thank you for this. Wow, what a powerhouse panel right here. A round of applause to them. They are fantastic. One may or may not be my constituent, Phil, another alliterative name. And then Gideon, we go way back 100 years ago when we crusaded for the pesticide ban in Toronto against all odds. So it can be done. It will be done with Highway 413. We will stop this bloody, nonsensical road to nowhere. And we're going to do it together. We're going to do it with, Gideon's got, all these guys have the facts. So you're just going to have the drive and the passion, and you're going to never give up, right? Because it's been done. And we've seen the reversals with this government, right? So they're just bulls in china shops, barging through, rules do not apply, and then they have to reverse because they hear from the people. And that's what they're going to hear from loudly and clearly till they're hearing impaired or whatever they are. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. But so it's people power. And we've seen the reversals with the notwithstanding clause, and we saw it with the farming, the severing of farmlands. And then we saw it again with the green belt. When I think Mike and I and probably Sandy said we will be bulldozed out of that green belt. It will not go ahead. So we'll do the same with the highway. So you need your homework, which I'm sure you already have, is to write. You have the list from Peter to write those MPPs, but write us too. It adds power to our voice in the chamber when we can say, I got 1,000. We've had hundreds of 413 emails, for sure. So letters, rallies, petitions, put it on the stinking social media, put it to good use for a change. Tell a friend, tell your neighbors, tell your enemies, tell anyone you can. Bring them on board with the facts. The Fords are all about, or I say the Ford, because it's only Ford and a half. They're all about never letting the facts get in the way of the good story, right? We hear that. Stop the gravy train, when they are like spilling gravy all over the place these days. So we know the facts. It's $10 billion. The money, the commute is like shaving 30 or 60 seconds off, not hours like they say. The farmland, the wetlands, the flooding that will happen, the greenhouse gases, we know all that. So use that, and there are alternatives. You heard the alternatives from Peter. These buggers are allergic to the words climate change. They're dinosaurs. They don't believe in it. Those words were not even in their throne speech. Their climate action, a couple things. One is creating a provincial park, which was already a park. And the other is socking all our eggs in the EV basket. Electric vehicles do have their use. They are not the answer, like to strong climate action. Come on. Also, they don't even have the supply chain. They keep bringing on these investors and building like commitments for these plants, and they don't have the commitment to build. They don't have the supply chain. They have not consulted with Indigenous people for the Ring of Fire, and so they're full of baloney. I'll be polite and use that word. But I just want to leave you with that hope. We are all better together. We will work across party lines. We have done it before. We will do it again, and we will do it together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary Margaret. And it's nice to hear you all say you're going to work together across party lines, because I think that's what it's going to take. So we could say we're saving the best for last. But next up is Mike Schreiner. Yeah.
Short bio. Short bio.
Well, I've got it here. Mike has been a strong voice against Highway 413 for many years and has led his party's initiative to stop the 413. Growing up on a farm, Mike was instilled with a passion for protecting people, animals, and the planet at a young age. As a leader of the Ontario Greens since 2009, Mike's constituents recognize him as a champion for climate action, income equality, and honest, transparent leadership. He's very active at Queen's Park, working cross-party lines to be a strong advocate for climate action, local food and water initiatives, affordable housing, protecting Ontario's frontline healthcare workers, small business, and mental health. Prior to entering politics, Mike was a successful entrepreneur, a small business owner, and one of the early advocates of the local food movement. He founded multiple initiatives that connected sustainable farmers with Ontario households. Welcome, Mike.
Well, it just warms my heart to see you all here. And if we build a 413, we're going to have a tough time connecting local farmers to local eaters, eh? So the fact that each and every one of you are here today is what is going to carry on the movement to stop Highway 413. And I want to tell you yeah, go ahead, please. I want to tell you a quick story. Last year, right at this time, I received a call from a number of the people who are leading the effort to stop Doug Ford from building on the Greenbelt. And they said to me, Mike, it feels like a done deal. We're thinking about giving up because we don't think we can stop this thing. And I said, we are not giving up. You are not giving up. The people of Ontario will not allow you to give up. And a few, journalistic articles later, an Auditor General's report, and a people-powered movement that just kept building and growing, finally forced Doug Ford to keep his promise, to keep his hands off the Greenbelt. And we can do the same thing with Highway 413. Every tactic this government is using right now is to try to convince you and the public that this is a done deal. And we cannot allow that to happen. And just like the Greenbelt, we have to let people know this highway is not about gridlock. What it's about is unlocking land value for a number of deep-pocketed, wealthy, well-connected speculators who want to cash in at our expense. So we have to say no to that. And you know what? Here's the other thing. If it was about facts, this would be stopped. If it was about caring for endangered species, this would be stopped. If this was about a government that cared about the food and farming economy, this would be stopped. If this was a government that actually cared about saving commuters' time, this would be stopped. If this was a government that wanted to spend billions on healthcare and education and housing, this would be stopped. So the reality is, none of that matters to this government. So the reality is, it's going to take each and every one of you to stop this. And so what I'm hoping you leave with tonight is a commitment that you're going to go out and talk to your family, your friends, your coworkers, your neighbors, people in your communities, and you're going to convince them to put one of these signs up in their yard. Because we need every conservative MPP to have to drive by one of these signs knowing their constituents are opposed to this highway. We need you to write every MP and MPP on the back of the sheet that Peter was talking about, because they need to hear from you, and the federal MPs need to hear from you as well, that this highway should be reclassified under a new climate impact or environmental impact assessment. While at the same time, we need to be telling Doug Ford's MPPs that they're not going to be reelected. They're not going to get your support if they approve this highway. And we need the media to know. And I've been telling them this, so you've got to deliver for me, okay? I've been telling them, you got to come out to Caledon. You got to come out to Vaughan. You got to come out to the route of Highway 413 and see all the yellow signs saying, stop Highway 413, to put an end to this myth that somehow it's just a bunch of downtown elites who are opposed to this highway, because it's the people who live here who are opposed to this highway. So I'm not going to kid you. This isn't going to be easy, okay? It's not going to be an easy fight. We've talked about all the ways in which, and thank you to my colleagues here, talking about the ways in which we forced Doug Ford's hand and had him reverse course. But on this one, I can tell you they're convinced. We hear it every day at Queen's Park, right? They're convinced that they won seats throughout this region, particularly in Brampton, because of Highway 413. And Gideon's polling numbers tell a different story. The signs tell a different story. The municipalities who have passed resolutions all along the route of the highway tell a different story. And now you and me and Sandy and Mary Margaret, we all have to work together across party lines and across jurisdictional lines to have this government feel the pain and to know that they are going to suffer politically if this highway is built. That is how we're going to stop it. It's going to be with people power, and each and every one of you need to commit to that tonight, because I can guarantee you, you have 3 opposition parties are going to stand with you and commit to it as well. So thanks for being here tonight.
Mike, thank you very much. And you're absolutely right. He talks about, the MPPs have convinced everybody that they won the election because of this highway. Well, they've unfortunately convinced the MPs in the same area that they need to pay attention, because their fortunes will be the same as what happened at the provincial level if they don't support the highway. So that's why they need to hear from you. That's why the MPs need to hear from you, because they're definitely hearing from They're definitely hearing from Doug Ford, and now they need, hearing a lot of from Doug Ford, but they need to hear from you, because they're convinced that's the rhetoric that he's been giving them. We won all those ridings, and we're going to win it at the federal level if you guys don't support the 413. So they need to hear from you. All right, so now we've got at least half an hour for questions. And anybody that's got questions, please don't forget, write them on the cards, hold up your hands, and we'll collect them. And I've got a few here to start off with. So the question was raised, and one of the first ones I have, is what is the Liberal position as a party in caucus on cancelling the Highway 413 now? When they were government, it was turned down as it wasn't needed. I think you've already spoken to that in your talk, so I don't think we need to, I think that question, for whoever asked that question, I think they got the answer. All right, so why did Premier Ford not send a representative to answer the questions today? Well, definitely shame on him is what's written here, and I agree.
They're afraid of you.
Yeah. No, actually, I think they're afraid of you guys, which is great. Yeah. They really, the problem is they don't want to hear from you. And that's the sad reality of it, right? So that's why we've got to kind of push it in their face, because they don't want to come and face the music. Is this a done deal? Well, you've heard today, no. It's never a done deal until it's over, and it's definitely not over, and there's a lot of work to be done. So that was that question.
Yeah, sir, and I just wanted to follow up. It's not just not a done deal in the way that the Greenbelt wasn't a done deal. That was law already. That was it was set in stone. Right. They were telling city councils, just go ahead and plan this area. You know, in Hamilton, when we talked to the chief planner, they're like, there's nothing we can do. We've got to start planning to develop the Greenbelt. And I said then that this land will never be developed, and nobody freaking believed me. Yeah. When we were in a much more difficult situation at that time, this time we literally had the federal government doing what we've asked and passing an impact assessment. And if Stephen Guilbeault gets his way, he will designate. I believe that. Yeah. So what we need to do is win that war within the Liberal caucus. Yeah. You got to pin down your MP, jam them in a corner, and say, swear to me that you are saying around the table, stop the 413, or I will never volunteer for you again. We're quits. We're done. Yeah, and you've got to jam them. You've got to buttonhole them. And you know, I've done this to Mary Margaret, but I didn't. Not that she needed it, but she saw the gimmick. I demonstrated the gimmick at our rally. That's what you've got to do. Get out of your shell, put them on the spot, make things uncomfortable. Don't be polite. You know what I mean? And get in there and jam them, and then we will win. Just like we did on the 413. Sorry, just like we did on the Greenbelt, because there was as much dirt. Thank you. As much sketchiness as there was behind the Greenbelt, there's as much of that to be found here. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. Okay. Does the cost, $6 billion to 12, include the expropriation costs? I think we know the answer. Phil, Peter, why don't you do that?
We think the costs do include land costs. Now, expropriation is normally at fair market value. We did do some internal analysis what land has been costing per hectare up in that region. So the 6 to 10 billion, or whatever the number is includes land. Now, Ministry of Transportation did look at the construction-only costs, and I seem to recall they came to 3 billion. So the balance, more than half, is land. So the answer is we think so. But no one has told us.
Yeah. Maybe we will. You guys want lights or not lights? No. Okay. I think everybody sees you. Yeah. Okay. So this question I don't think we can answer, but it's basically asking, when does the expropriation process start and all of that. I think my understanding of EA. Go ahead, Phil. Go ahead.
He's talking about it. It won't start unless the federal government decides not to do its job. Unless the federal government betrays all of you, then it won't start. And so if it starts, it's because the federal government hasn't done its job, and you can blame them as much as the provincial government.
And I would just add to that they are laying the groundwork for that, because their last bill is the Get It Done bill. They have or I like to say, get it done for who, right? Which is my question. So they have in that bill, which has passed, right? Or just passed, and we all voted against it. But it has a clause in there, a schedule, that expedites expropriation, land expropriation, which was already easy for them to do, without an environmental assessment. So they don't even have to prove need or appropriateness. They can expropriate it. And I'll just say here, for example, Wilmot, I don't know if you've heard of Wilmot, they're looking at losing 770 acres of Class 1 farmland, and they think it's connected to this expropriation and also this wild west of planning that they're unleashing. So the expropriation process, as Phil has said, if the federal Liberals don't step in, they have lined up all their ducks, so this could happen quickly if it does. Sorry.
Yeah. So much for protecting people's
I'm trying
rights.
I'm realistic, not depressing.
Yeah, well, that's fair. That's fair. I think people need to know what we're up against. And is Ford willing to die on this hill? I do believe at this moment he believes it's in his best interest to die on this hill. He's done his campaign on it, so I think he's willing to do that. So we're going to have to aid in the death.
I want to underline that none of our strategy depends on Doug Ford personally changing his mind. Our whole theory of change is not based on that. What it's based on is pushing the decision into another time slot where there's an opportunity that there might be a different conservative leader. None of it hinges on Doug Ford changes his mind. So if your concern is we're never going to change Doug Ford's mind, none of his advocates, if we thought we needed to change Doug Ford's mind in order to win this, we wouldn't be putting all the effort into the site. It's not in any way what this is about.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is it better to write and mail a real letter, or is it email just as good? And I think we've got 3 great speakers here that could talk to how they're influenced. Go ahead.
I love a good handwritten letter, and I will respond in writing a nice handwritten letter response because my mom taught me to write cards. But the emails are great. Signs, I forgot that. Mike said that signs in your lawn. Call. Use the phone. Clog up their phone lines, for crying out loud. And feel free to do the social media.
And so the other thing I would say is start organizing for the plowing match, which happens every fall. Because I guarantee you, having the farmers boo the premier at the plowing match certainly influenced his mind. And I know we don't need the premier to change his mind. I think Phil is absolutely right. But the more we can rattle him, I think the better.
Okay. And I would just add, if you do write letters to your MPPs or your whomever, CC us, so we have copies of it as well, because we can stand up in the legislature, because they won't respond, but we will say, hey, you got this letter and you haven't responded, so CC all of us as well.
Okay, excellent.
Oh, sorry, one more thing. If you have a local newspaper, write letters to the editor.
Yes, agreed. Very much agree on that too. How and when will the Chiefs of Ontario speak out? I'm not sure really we can answer that question. So.
I can't speak on
Nope.
the Chiefs of Ontario, but they're very active. Check their website. There's a lot happening in June is the assembly. So I don't think there's a resolution on this, but I imagine there will be.
Okay.
So we should write you, or write the Chiefs.
No, that won't do you any good.
Well, that's, honesty, it's good to know, right? But how that works.
I will just add, and I agree with what you're saying, but we in the NDP caucus, we have the First Nations MPP is named Saul Mamakwa, and he meets, it's amazing. Right to Saul. Right to Saul, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And Saul's information's accessible, just like everyone else's.
He's the MPP for Quitnong, and his name's Saul Mamakwa, and you can find him just on the list of the
excellent
NDP MPPs. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. What is the EA process with regard to these new legislative changes? Have they changed the EA process? And Phil?
So, the final language hasn't been changed. It hasn't necessarily changed. There are options to do it in a much weaker way if they wanted to, but there's no mandate that they do it in a weaker way. Perhaps one of the bigger concerns is that the freeze on construction may be narrower under the proposed legislation, so that if they wanted to take a huge gamble and say, oh, we think eventually we'll win, they could start building some interchanges that have nothing to do with any federal responsibility somewhere. They could try to do that in a way that they couldn't have before. But that would really mean gambling $10 or $11 billion potentially on an outcome of the federal impact assessment that they want. And so they might dig some holes somewhere for show, but we don't see that as really changing the whole balance of likelihood of what's happening.
Okay, thank you.
I just say on the province side, because there is a provincial EA as well. And Sandy was right when she said they've really paved the way to weaken the EA. And so with the legislative changes that have already passed and that are being proposed through regulations, would actually allow them to start doing work on the highway and expropriating land both prior to completing an environmental assessment. Which makes you wonder, like, that's on the provincial side, which makes you wonder why we even have a provincial environmental assessment at that point. But anyway, so that's why it is so important to put pressure on federal MPs for the federal impact assessment.
It's kind of stunning. Every time Doug wants to do something, he just basically brings forward the legislation to change all the rules so that he can do whatever he wants to do. It's just shocking. Yeah, sorry. I was trying. Okay. Who has the final approval authority of the EA, the provincial EA, I think is what, not sure what this one is, but I think it's provincial. No? Okay. The answer is yes. But we can talk after if there's a bit more detail that you want there. Sorry, what?
For the provincial EA, it's been changed, at least for the time being, to Ministry of Transportation because it's now a EA. Yeah.
Okay, I should have known that you had your answer already. You just wanted to let everybody know. You don't know who's in charge. Yeah.
There is a website dedicated to the 413 EA if you Google it on the provincial side of things. So, yeah. Anyway, well, write my office and I'll send you. Yeah, the information is limited, but I can at least send you what's there.
Highway413.ca is the provincial website on the project.
Okay, I would just say not to trust what you read on the website. I'll give you an example of how silly that website is. On that website, they say that there's a panel of environmental NGOs who are being consulted about the 413 and okayed, and with our friends' help over here, we did some digging to find out, well, who are these people? We want to talk to them. We want to find, like, convince, what NGOs are so confused and they think that the 413 is okay. And guess who they said? Environmental defense. So, so I was apparently, I don't know if I'm waking up in the middle of the night and walking over to the duck house and, I don't know, but don't trust what they say.
Yeah, and they've changed the process so many times, it's probably not even up to date on that website. I wouldn't try and use it.
But we have a 413 website, so if you want the actual facts, go to the Environmental Defense 413 website. We've got up-to-date maps of the project information, and you can also always shoot me or our general line an email, and we can generally answer some of those questions for you.
Okay. I see from some of the questions that have come in, there's a bit of despair in the room. Even with an EA assessment that's underway and all the changes that have been going on, is there really any way that this EA is really going to stop this highway? And I think you want to talk to, that's why we're putting pressure on the federal government, because it's the federal government that has jurisdiction on endangered species, Indigenous consultation, and so that's why we're pushing the Fed. But go ahead.
Yeah, so the federal government absolutely has jurisdiction over most of this project. So there's fish habitat all along the route that is federal jurisdiction. They cannot build it across the 85 waterways that they have to cross without federal fish permits. They cannot build it in endangered species habitat without federal permits for species that have federally protected habitat and where they're going to kill, harm, or harass the species. So they absolutely have jurisdiction, and if we get another designation under the Impact Assessment Act, then a prohibition is put in place on the project until the federal impact assessment is done. And but there are other processes provincially, like there's the Class EA still has to be started and finished. They have to deal with endangered species permits provincially, which will go to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. And we've seen through our Freedom of Information requests that staff in that ministry are not very happy with the project. Notwithstanding that they have approved every permit in the past. But there's a whole process the province has to go through, no matter how hard they try to speed this up or speed up expropriations and go through things. They haven't even finished the design of the highway, not even the preliminary, like high-level design of this highway yet. Their own staff in the Freedom of Information requests that we've done are saying this thing is years, like all caps underlined, years away. So don't buy the hype that this is happening tomorrow or next year. You're going to see a lot of posturing. Ford standing in front of a sign with a bulldozer, like clearing a small patch of land. The highway has not been designed. Don't fall for these gimmicks.
Can I just point out, though, that we know Doug Ford doesn't need a permit to do anything. We saw what happened in the Duffins Creek after we stopped the Amazon warehouse. We have got to be vigilant. Go to greenbeltguardians.ca, sign up to watch your areas of land. We need eyes on it because we will take plows out there and will dig it up, with or without a permit. That was for a plan.
Okay, we're going to try and stay control. I get the point, and there's a lot of emotion in the room and a lot of frustration, which is kind of why we thought we'd take the questions and we just try to work them quickly so you get the answers you need. Does the area of concern for the highway pass through any lands that fall under Indigenous treaty or sovereignty?
Yeah, it's all treaty land. It's all treaty area. It's covered. As I outlined, there's a number of communities whose territories. My community, we have, I think, probably the oldest treaty covering that area. That's from 1701. So yeah, it's all covered, and that was another point from the last discussion. It's not just the federal government who has to consult. The provincial government is also bound by that duty to consult First Nations as well. And we did talk about there was a legal action, and they were told that they need to do a better job. Doesn't mean that they necessarily will. Yeah, so it is still the responsibility of the provincial government to fulfill that, and it gets complicated, and it's going to be challenging with that many First Nations.
Thank you. Thanks. A question to all of you. As a picture's worth 1,000 words, does anybody in the room have opposition of having a picture taken and sent to the media to let them know that we are all here talking on this issue? Is anybody doesn't want to have that happen? Because we do have media here. I want to make sure you all recognize that you're going to be potentially in the paper, all right? And I hope someone on our team is taking pictures too, so that we've got some pictures to show that we had this awesome panel with an awesome audience and a great evening. Okay, a couple more. Do you think it's fair that Doug Ford got 60% of the seats with 40% of the votes? Okay, I don't think I need to answer that. Yeah, exactly. Maybe need some election reform. Okay. Did I open another Pandora's box? Oh dear. Close that door. Sorry, guys. Okay. Has anyone approached the 407 owners re the proposal to subsidize the trucker tolls? Peter.
I have approached the 407 owners. And they're very interested in it. I mean, they're business people. They will listen to anybody. They just recently gave a deal to infrequent 407 users a discount. So they want to make money. And if there's a way to boost traffic on an empty road that you actually landed a plane on one time, why not? So I've approached them. We have asked the province to approach it, because who am I, right? I don't believe they have. We have asked the project team if they've approached them, and I think the answer is no. But they are definitely open to a discussion, as any business person would be.
Okay, Phil? Oh,
So we had our opposition day motion calling on the Ford government to remove the tolls for truckers, not only on the 407 that's privately owned, but on the portion of the 407 that the government owns. I think
Right.
that's something that we need to always remind people,
Yeah.
that they own a chunk of it as well. And so we are, the people say, well, it's privately owned, why would they want to come to the table? But did you ask them? I mean, there's the question. And I think you may all know that the 407 owed the province $1 billion because they didn't fulfill
Yeah.
some of the contract. So what did the Ford government do with that $1 billion? He said, can you keep it? We don't need it. So they waived $1 billion fine for the owners of the 407. So this is a Doug Ford that goes like he's like a deal maker and he likes to get in there and make deals. Well, make a deal with the 407. It was a once in a lifetime probably opportunity when the 407 owed the province $1 billion to say, hey, we'll negotiate that so that some of that windfall, lands in the pockets of the people of the province who bought and paid for that damn thing in the first place. So I just want to remind you, and again, in that debate, they said all kinds of things like there's nothing we can do about it, and it's a private enterprise, but I just want to remind you that the province themselves, if they won't negotiate with the owners of the 407, they own a chunk of it, and they have full control over the chunk of it that they still own.
Phil wants a word? Or two?
I understand why we're going in that direction, but we have to remember this idea of needing a deal between the province and the 407 ETR is a bit of a red herring that's been thrown by the province itself, because our modeling of the cost, as you know, is just based on you go on the 407 ETR and we pay your toll, right? It doesn't depend on any deal. It's not like, oh, the 407 doesn't want to deal with this. The 407 can't stop the provincial government from giving truckers the money that they pay for the toll. None of it depends on the 407 signing on. So it's intentionally laid out by the province as some kind of complication, so this seems like some pie on the sky plan. Paying truckers money is not complicated to do.
So, thanks, Phil. And that's exactly it. I mean, Ford's basically laying his own pathway and won't entertain anything that would potentially impact building this highway, because he's made commitment to people, to his friends, and he wants to see this through. So he's not going to look at alternatives that would make it not necessary, right?
Can I say one thing on the, well, good question. Can I say one more thing on the 407 really quick, though, is, as we've all set up here, this highway is not going to be built for 10, 15, maybe longer. So when you're talking to people and you're saying, hey, we're here to stop this highway, and they come back to you and say, I'm sick of gridlock, I'm sick of being stuck in traffic, we just need a highway, it's like, we can start paying tolls on truckers tomorrow. Like literally tomorrow, We don't have to wait 15 years for you to have relief for gridlock.
Okay, we've got a few more minutes, and then we're going to have to wrap up because we agree that the meeting is to end at 9. I got a question here, but I think the answer's already been done, which is, can we push the 407 toll issue as a strategy? And, is it a viable strategy? I think we heard the answer. It is. It is a viable strategy. I think we should be pushing it. People, when they hear, especially, in Brampton and the places where they're like, we need this road. You talked about the 407. Well, if the 407 was an option, well, of course we don't need the 413, right? It's like a no-brainer. So, yeah. Anyone else want to say anything before we leave that one? Oh, Laura?
Just one more thing, which is, even putting aside paying the tolls tomorrow, putting aside all of these other immediate strategies, like the government has shown that you know, legislation is a very powerful thing, and anything that they want to make happen on the 407, they have the legislative authority to make happen. It doesn't depend on making a deal. It doesn't depend on anything except the political will being there to actually get it done.
Yep. And again, one of these questions is really just pushing on the same strategy, saying, you know, we need to get the 401 drivers because this is a long-term project. The 413 is not, you know, it's a decade plus. We need to get those drivers that are angry right now about all the congestion to push the 407 as the solution, because that is an immediate solution, right?
Deb, 30% of the traffic on the 401 is trucks. So if half of those disappeared and went to the 407, there'd be a lot of relief for a lot of people. And think how much road space they take, well said, and safer. So there's many, many advantages. What the panel actually mentioned back in 2017 is actually giving the trucks one lane on the 407, and that would be the perfect optimal safety thing, because a lot of people, including me, don't like to ride next to a truck.
I think I've looking at most of these, why the Auditor General identified expert opposition in 2022 and the previous government, hang on a minute, where was I? And the previous government cited its own report that for the 413 was a bad idea. Did this government then, yeah, basically resurrect it? Like what was the evidence and why was the previous report not considered? Like, we kind of know the answer to that, right? Go ahead, Phil.
So the answer is that this is not a transportation plan. This is a $10 or $11 billion subsidy for particular pieces of land owned by particular pieces of people to become a lot more valuable. And that's all it is. The only rationale for building 413 versus doing the 407 thing is that the 407 thing wouldn't make those particular landowners happy, and those landowners have a lot of political influence. And so we have to stop talking about this like it's even a good faith belief on the part of the Ford government and, oh, they have their proposal and we have our alternate proposal, and why don't you look at ours? There's an alternative. No, there's only one sensible alternative, which is to do the 407.
Yeah, I have
invest in public transit and not put sprawl in that area at all, right? And the whole 413 scheme is just like the whole idea of a transportation need or a corridor. It's all just a post-rationalization for subsidizing sprawl development on the northern Peel Plain. Every home that they want to put on the Peel Plain would go very easily in Brampton. There was a whole other strategy, the Heritage Heights strategy, still on the books. All of those homes can go in Heritage Heights. Toronto can grow a lot more. Existing neighborhoods all over the GTA have a lot of capacity. There's no need for this land. Like, there's enough land that doesn't include the 413 corridor area to exceed the next 30 years of new homes and workplaces. So all that growth that we're talking about, none of it, there's no need for anywhere of it to go anywhere near the 413 corridor.
But you and I both know it's all about land value increase. And once you put something like this in place, then you've upped your value of your land significantly, and there's what it's all about. So I'm getting lots of questions, but we're running out of time. So back onto the question that we were just talking about, which, how do we identify the beneficiaries of who's going to benefit? And I think there has been some of that already done. There's a report. Okay, go ahead. Who wants to talk to that?
It's a matter of public record, that's all. I mean, all you have to do is look at the Narwhal and the Star, and it's a couple of years now, but they just identify who the developers are, what land they own. They're the same developers that went to Doug Ford's Stag and Doe and his daughter's wedding and had their land rezoned, or went to Vegas. Like these decisions were made on a massage table in Vegas. Like, can you believe that? So it's a matter of public record. We're not just speculating who's going to benefit.
Okay. Yeah, I just want, it's pinned up on the wall over there, and there's on a full version of it on the table if you want to. It was a really good article done. And there you go. Okay, so this is a question that isn't exactly relevant for our forum, but I'll throw it out here and see if anybody wants to take it. How does what's happening on the 413 relate to the Bradford bypass, and can the Bradford bypass be stopped by the same process that we're trying to do for the 413? Who would like to speak to that?
Hi. So the Bradford bypass follows a pretty similar trajectory. It's part of the same package. It's part of the same, benefiting certain landowners along the corridor. It also goes through sensitive habitat. So far, the federal government hasn't designated the Bradford bypass. It's got some different political landscape issues around, support at the federal government level. We did make a request under the former Impact Assessment Act to have it designated, and then there was a second request, and that one was turned down, and the federal court found that turning it down was unreasonable. But of course, since then, the Impact Assessment Act has been found to be unconstitutional. So, I mean, the highway does raise many of the same issues, many of the same problems, and by all means, when you're advocating against this highway, go ahead and advocate against that one too.
Okay.
Yeah, and very quickly, I will add that as the NDP are clearly opposed to the 413, I wrote in my capacity as environment critic to the Minister Guilbeault to have them designate or do an environmental assessment. He turned me down, obviously the whole province down, saying that nothing had materially changed from the last time they did the environmental assessment. I keep saying the wrong thing. The Bradford bypass, yes. Absolutely. So we're opposed to the Bradford bypass. I agree with you saying it's the same process, but I just want to be very clear. The Ontario NDP is opposed to it and have worked to try and get the federal government to designate it for an environmental assessment.
Ditto to the Greens. And I actually have a bill on the order paper. Unfortunately, it's not going to be debated anytime soon. That's no more highways in the Greenbelt. That would actually make it illegal to build 400 series highways anywhere in the Greenbelt.
No. Yeah. Go ahead.
Triple diddle.
Okay. All right. So there's just two more questions, and can the funds allocated to this highway be used to improve other, like public transit, transportation, other initiatives? Of course. The answer is yes. And that's what we're advocating for as well. Last one then. Can someone touch on the story of the Allen Expressway highway through Toronto as it relates to it's never too late? So I want to personally there are a few other questions here, but I think most of them got touched. The issues that they were raising were addressed. So unless somebody has a burning question that didn't get touched, I think we've pretty well answered most of what people wanted to hear. I wanted to personally, did you want to say something?
Just before we break up, can we make sure that we
okay.
So I'd like to turn around and get a selfie with everybody.
Okay, so don't scoot out the room. Andre's going to do a closing little thing. And then what really would be great is if we could have people come up and stand in front here. We'll take a big picture, or do you want to do it with them seated?
Just turn around like this.
Okay, you can stand here and we'll take a picture. We'll take care of it. So don't dash out the room. Don't dash out the room after we have our closing. All right, thank you. Over to Andre.
May I just suggest that the federal ministers to write to, based on what Lori has so eloquently talked about our red-sided days and fish, we should write also to the federal minister of fisheries and ocean, please. Yes. These postcards with red-side days on them. It's to your MP, so please, before you go, please sign these, and I'll drop them in the mailbox.
All right, folks, this was a great, I hope this meeting was informative for you, was it? It gives you hope.
You know, we know we're on the right side. We just got to make sure Doug Ford says that damn Stop the 413 Now community group. Exactly. So, big round of applause for our speakers. Thanks so much. Also for our volunteers, the ladies from Bond Cares. They did all the heavy lifting. The rest of us just were talking. What else can we do? We have the facts. I know most of you signed the sheets here. We'll put you on our information. We'll give you updates. Go onto our Facebook page. Even I'm now on social media. My kids aren't laughing at me anymore. Spread the word. Talk to your friends. There's people out there that think it's a done deal. You tell why it's wrong, then you tell them open the 407, and it resonates with them. Yeah. Keep up that pressure. Lawn signs, please take lawn signs, put them at your parents' house, whatever. Yeah, we have Marilyn Iafredi, who's our Ward 1 counselor. I'd like her to come up. Who's been a great supporter of us and very helpful.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank everyone for coming out. I know there's a lot of people, not just from Vaughan, but across the GTA. All the more important because you've made a commitment to come out and work with all of us to fight this. City of Vaughan is on record as opposing the highway. My colleague was here, Regional Councillor Mario Racco, but I think he's left. So I do want to acknowledge he was not on council when we took the vote, but his wife Sandra Young Racco did support us and voted against the highway. So we are here with you. This is really almost a personal thing for me because the most environmentally destructive part of this highway comes through my area. So I look after Maple and Kleinberg. Kleinberg is all the Greenbelt area, plus, and I keep trying to remind people, it is a federally designated heritage river. The Humber River is federally designated. How can we even think about putting a 1 kilometer bridge, probably 700 feet high, the amount of salt that you have to put on that bridge to keep it from icing up, where do you think it's all going to go? What do you think it's going to destroy? It is absolutely ludicrous. I have been very vocal on social media. I will continue to do this. And I think, who was it who mentioned, I'm helping the group because actually there's a number of people here from Vaughan Cares. We worked, moms with children, fighting the provincial government at the time where they wanted to put in the largest landfill in North America in my community in Maple. We fought it and we won. But it requires tenacity. It requires that you do everything all the time, constantly, consistently. The letter writing, the emails, the phone calls, the rallies, meetings like this. This is what keeps up the pressure. The moment you stop, then you've given in to the other side. I know I will never give in to the other side. I'm really happy that we've got some really tremendous people here backing us up. And I know that all of you will continue to help us with this fight because this highway cannot happen. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you to our wonderful guests.